Employing Ji Han-jae's specific Hapkido skills shows Lee's ongoing impetus to widen his cinematic martial vocabulary. It was clearly a challenge as, unlike Inosanto and Abdul-Jabbar, Ji Han-jae was not someone Lee had trained extensively with. As such, there was a lack of familiarity with how they would move with one another. Of course, Lee was no less tenacious in wanting to create a spectacular duel while also keeping true to his philosophy. And it shows with take after take, experimentation after experimentation, all to best capture this clash of martial bodies. Lee is most renowned for his martial arts ability on and off the screen, and rightfully so. But this iconic status, coupled with the often critical dismissal of Kung Fu cinema, often belied his skills as a cinematic storyteller. Many forget that Lee was an actor first, and appreciated the craftsmanship of American and Japanese filmmakers. In fact, he believed the Hong Kong film industry should employ the same standard of artistry if it were to compete with the worldwide circuit. We can see this incentive at work as Lee gained more creative control, and it's particularly true in this penultimate duel. The first day's filming concludes with Bruce's first blow against Ji, shot at a number of speeds over multiple takes. When Lee first approaches Ji, he raises one hand to his opponent. The pose is a peculiar amalgamation of a fighting stance and a gesture to beckon his opponent to attack. It becomes obvious that Lee must make the first move. With the most deliberate pace, Lee retracts his hand and eventually reaches a crescendo, that being a dynamic roundhouse kick. To quote his choreography notes, he relaxes, smiles, and puts his hand back, and while keeping his smile, initiates a lightning right finger jab feint, follows instantaneously with a low high hook kick, with fluid speed, intense grace, and powerful 1-2-3. Each gesture and movement are simple by design, but when utilized with the correct intent and rhythm, as Lee does, it effectively establishes the narrative conflict and adds a level of anticipation and suspense. Through these rushes, we not only see the breakdown of Lee's choreographic decisions, but also his directorial decisions and his approach to storytelling. It must be stressed that these are rushes after all, far away from being a completed and refined product. But as with the previous two levels involving Inosanto and Abdul-Jabbar, there is enough evidence here to show Lee wanting to elevate what would be another one-on-one martial arts duel. Structurally, the Hall of the Dragon is no different to the Hall of the Tiger and the Hall of the Unknown, but they all possess their own key characteristic that influences the action unfolding at their centers. That characteristic could be obtrusive, like the darkness in the Abdul-Jabbar fight, or insidious, like the harsh red light in this one. But given the planned order of these three levels, we do get a sense that the higher we climb the pagoda, the more otherworldly the surroundings become. All this is further evidence that for Lee, the choreography isn't just about the interaction between two individuals. It is also the interaction with the space, and how the action escalates when said space changes. The second day's filming begins with the second angle, only this time shot at regular speed. 2 takes of an additional angle will also be filmed as part of the pickup filming 3 days later. If this feint is intended to demonstrate Haitian's canniness and unpredictability, then the next shot shows that he will have his work cut out for him, as Ji lands gracefully and regains his fighting stance, seemingly unfazed. Another aspect of Lee's choreography is the camera work. Many fans and critics championed his naturalistic approach to capturing fight scenes, specifically the use of a wide-angle lens, which represents the audience's objective standpoint, a clear window that authenticates the physical abilities being exhibited. This is certainly true, but also an oversimplification of Lee's creative stamp. Much credit goes to the film's cinematographer, Tadashi Nishimoto, for injecting such visual dynamism in each of these wide shots. But it's when the camera moves, even slightly, that it becomes a third participant in Lee's choreography. A good example would be the shaky point of view shot of Jihan Jae as he kicks Bruce back to the floor. An impressionistic design choice, showing what it would be like to be on the receiving end of such a blow. And it's no accident that we are seeing this through the hero's eyes. For this reason, we, as an audience, are both Bruce Lee's observer and his advocate. Further evidence of this would be when Lee circles around his opponent. He extends out one arm to keep his distance, all the while searching for a way in for his next strike. Here, the camera moves in tandem with Lee, capturing not only his movement, but also his screen energy. Lee fails to stop Chie from ascending the stairway, and as Jihan Jae runs forward, presumably in his own attempt to stop Chie, Haiqian unleashes a multitude of snapping sidekicks towards him. The violence is interrupted once again, when Chie is thrown back down to the 4th level by an unknown assailant. It is here the audience will gasp and question, what powerful individual could be guarding the 5th and final level? We obviously know that the assailant is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but in this unfolding story, this moment of dark humour interrupts the danger happening on screen by foreshadowing a larger danger ahead. Some fans have speculated that Che Yuan did not in fact perform the jump, in spite of his considerable experience as a stuntman, largely due to on-set photographs showing Hwang In-shik dressed in Chie's character's clothing. In fact, we can clearly see Chie's face in the flashes between takes, proving he did indeed make the fall himself. However, he is doubled by Hwang In-shik elsewhere in this scene, and his lifeless corpse, seen later on, is in fact doubled by Bruce's longtime friend and housekeeper, Wu Nagan. Regardless of Chie's fate, and the ease with which his dead body has been thrown back down to the floor below, James Tien's ruthless ambition to reach the top floor has not dimmed one iota. And as we already know, that ambition will soon prove to be his downfall. In the following sequence, we see Chien trying to sneak over to the stairway. However, he is quickly stopped and knocked down by Ji. What follows this is another silent, humorous exchange as Lee gestures Tien to stand aside, almost like a parent figure ordering a mischievous child to stand in the corner. Bruce Lee had many misgivings about Hong Kong's filmmaking practices. In particular, the overabundance of classical shapes and the dance-like choreography in the contemporary crop of martial arts pictures. The visual rhythm was overly rehearsed and tiresome, the same old tune played over and over. His own brand of choreography was a direct reaction to this, Based on the ethos of his Jeet Kune Do, Lee wanted to present the spontaneity of real-life combat, the practicality and improvisation involved when using the body as a weapon, and the emotional volcano that erupts whenever that weapon is swung. He strived for a visual rhythm that didn't follow a set pattern, rather, something that constantly breaks and resets that pattern. We have seen this already, when after reacting to Che Yuan's fall from the top floor, Lee attempts to strike Jihan Jie, but the current of Ji's Hapkido throws proves too overwhelming. After a brief respite, Lee manages to adapt and overcome Ji's throws, riding his opponent's current before landing 2 clean strikes, one in the rib and the other in the groin, just like the willow tree riding with the wind in the film's planned opening. As mentioned, Lee disliked the dance-like martial spectacles of the time, but that doesn't mean his own kung fu spectacles weren't musically inclined. Any type of choreography is still a composition of moments, a through line where one's emotional content is being expressed. It's a whimsical, even overly romantic cliché that martial arts are often compared to music. But just like music, martial arts screen fighting employs a rhythm and song-like structure to captivate its audience. In these rushes, we get a real sense of Lee's distinctive rhythm and its role in advancing the characters and story. The actual movements themselves are indeed an impressive collage of Lee's cinematic violence. However, these are just the high and powerful notes of a chorus, and a chorus is never continuous. There needs to be build-up, quiet melodies in between the violence that allow the emotional content to unfold. Or in musical terms, the verse that unfolds a song's story and theme. It is in these quiet moments we latch to Lee's point of view, his emotional disposition in the stillness as he re-evaluates the circumstances around him. These would be the vital springboards to the next barrage of punches and kicks. In many ways, these have more to do with Lee's acting ability than his martial ability, and it's largely the reason why his would-be imitators fail to recapture his uniqueness. As we return to the advancing stage of the bout, we see James Tien's second attempt to reach the top level. This time, he succeeds. However, as we are already privy to, the Guardian of the Unknown proves far too formidable. Tien's actions in the fourth level provide story context to the fifth level material already shot. So when he finally faces the Guardian of the Unknown, it is actually a character payoff, that being the comeuppance for his scheming ways. The events as noted will directly impact the actions in the fourth level, as we get another break in between the Lee vs Ji bout. Dust falls on Hai Qian's head, and in the point of view shot, we see the ceiling shake. Again, a narrative plant is signposted to the audience. This time, the falling dust is a visual foreshadowing of the enormous ability and power the fifth level Guardian has. The amount of narrative and philosophical cogs at work here makes Bruce Lee's choreography all the more impressive, and a strong indication that he was thinking far beyond wanting to flex fancy shapes. Punches and kicks weren't just random movements to Lee, they were choices of how to display his fighting philosophy effectively. Likewise, there was no dead space in between the violence, as they would provide the character's emotional content and forward momentum to the story. This is arguably the key component in Lee's philosophy, as it allows the audience to emotionally connect with these spectacular fighting bodies. In an interview with Pierre Berton, Lee commented, "It is easy for me to put on a show and be cocky. I can show you some really fancy movements. But to express oneself honestly is very hard to do." Applying this quote too literally would be missing the point, especially on such an exaggerated premise as the Game of Deaths. But the honest expression doesn't come from the premise, nor the character Lee's playing. After all, it's all make-believe. The make-believe is not his voice, but a vessel for his voice to reach his audience. As such, to honestly express oneself is to resonate with some form of truthful human connection. Even within the exaggerated backdrop, we see Lee as always trying to find these moments to truly connect with us, the audience. And if an emotion stirs within us, then in that sense, his expression is most certainly truthful and honest. As we see Hai Qian reacting to the sound of James Tien screaming for help from the floor above, the final stage of his bout with Jihan Jie commences. Both men trade a series of kicks before Lee's attempt to subdue Ji results in getting kicked in the face. As both men lie on the floor, exhausted, Hai Qian backs off and considers his next move. Over the years, rumours have swirled that Bruce Lee was unhappy with the Hall of the Dragon footage, whether it was dissatisfaction with his own choreography or Jihan Jie's performance. Nothing, however, that can be corroborated through interviews, Lee's notes, or anything we see in the footage itself. Indeed, we frequently see Lee smiling and in a positive mood in the flashes between takes, as well as the photographs taken on set by Chan Yuk. It's not out of the question that the Hall of the Dragon shoot may have been more challenging than the filming of the other two levels, if only because, in comparison to Dan Inosanto and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, close friends with whom Bruce had trained for years, Ji was a relative stranger who spoke little to no English, making the process of getting a performance from him more difficult by comparison. Furthermore, while Ji's Hapkido skills are beyond reproach, and he is obviously capable of matching Bruce blow for blow, there's inarguably something lacking in the Hall of the Dragon compared to the other two levels. A real sense of menace, or palpable threat. Regardless, despite persistent rumours that Bruce wanted to reshoot the scene entirely, some say with another actor playing the role of the fourth floor guardian, the fact remains that there is no evidence to corroborate this, and in any event, what we see now is all there is, and all there will ever be. As the scene nears its end, both men are covered with sweat and running on fumes. But of course, Bruce emerges triumphant, as he hoists Ji up and brings him crashing down on his knee, breaking his back. Unlike the third floor guardian, Hai Qian leaves Ji alive, but crippled beyond repair. He stumbles to the stairway, and barely has time to catch his breath before he reacts to a sound from upstairs, most likely James Tien's character being pummeled by whoever is waiting for Hai Qian above. The third day of filming ends, As Bruce Lee ascends, his epic battle with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar awaiting him. Bruce and James Tien watch at the sidelines as Tien once again encourages Che to continue. These quiet moments crop up frequently, showing the ebb and flow of this physical interaction. One other quality these moments reveal is Lee's keen sense of humour. Lee had worked with comedy before, most notably in The Way of the Dragon. In The Game of Death, we see his use of humour grow in sophistication, as the humour injects the action with personality while never losing sight of advancing the narrative. The interplay between Lee and James Tien perfectly demonstrates this. In one shot, we see the two debate about who should next battle the Fourth Floor Guardian. It's a wordless exchange, communicated only through movements and gestures, each one carefully timed to hit its intended mark. If The Game of Death was completed as intended, this moment would most likely act as a payoff to the character interplay between Lee and Tien, that being our hero finally one-upping Tien's duplicitous schemer. As well as being the last day of filming The Game of Death at Golden Harvest Studios, October 25th is also the last day of filming for James Tien and Che Yuan. Though Che appears in several more films over the next 5 years, including 1976's box office record breaker, The Private Eyes, he arguably never quite gets an opportunity to shine like he did in The Game of Death. Similarly, James Tien's career as a star never quite regained the momentum of his earliest days at Golden Harvest, and as a character actor, he became a mainstay of Hong Kong action cinema for many more years, playing villains for directors like John Woo, Sammo Hung, and Jackie Chan. He retired from acting in 1997 and vanished from the public eye entirely, his current whereabouts unknown. And so the filming of the pagoda scenes on The Game of Death concludes. There's still a bit more shooting left to go outside, But these two additional angles of Bruce's feint and jump kick against G are the last studio sequences ever shot for the film. The sets are dismantled, and the project is officially put on pause. So much of the conversation around the Game of Death revolves around what it was supposed to be, or what it could have been. So let's take a step back and ask a simpler question. What is it now? What are we left with? Stripping away any interpretations or feelings the project may inspire, the inescapable truth is that all we have is a series of disparate pieces, fragments of a vision forever unrealized. Too many puzzle pieces missing. We have 2 hours of filmed material with no sound and no indication of how much, if any of it, might have made it into the finished film. Instead, there is a void where additional scenes, editing and sound design should go. A void that allows each individual to project the Game of Death that they want, the Bruce Lee that they want, onto what is left. Is it his lost masterpiece? The pinnacle of his achievements thus far? One could argue that it cannot qualify. Masterpieces have to be finished first. Whatever lofty ambitions Bruce may have had for the project, going for that void, the unknowable truth of how Bruce Lee might have completed the Game of Death, there is still so much to celebrate. It is an incomplete project, yes, that even in its rawest form, arguably shows more ambition and offers more excitement than many finished films. It remains Lee's most straightforward and earnest cinematic expression of his personal ethos, his next, and sadly last, confident stride forward as a filmmaker. Some may argue that Enter the Dragon, as his last completed film, shows Bruce Lee at the peak of his powers, the pinnacle of his physical form and fighting ability. But if you believe the journey is as important as the destination, then as evidenced by the photos taken on set and the glimpses seen between takes, what survives of the Game of Death may show something greater. A man who has achieved great success and is still reaching outward, still hopeful for the future, still expanding the boundaries of what a man in his position might achieve. To watch the Game of Death is to see Bruce Lee at his most assured, his most fulfilled, and arguably his most happy.